But why are you suddenly rising in the polls?
Well, I think part of it is that people are looking for something completely different. And, you know, we're in this moment. I really believe that
I thought we got that.
Well, in a way, we did, right? I mean, each election in many ways produces somebody who's the reverse of what we just had.
True.
And you could argue that it doesn't get more different from this president than a laid-back, intellectual, young gay mayor from the Midwest.
No. You are right. I mean, we hear the stories about you, like you found a book you wanted to read, but it was not translated from the Norwegian, so you learned Norwegian. I don't know what Trump is, but you're the opposite of that. I mean, he's fat, you're thin, he's old, you're young. You went to Afghanistan, he dodged the draft, right? There's a lot of reasons.
We're very different people.
You're very different. So how do you beat him?
Well, I think that's part of the idea. I mean, look, the paradox here is in order to beat Trump, we got to run a campaign that's not all about Trump. You know, the more it's about him, I think folks at home are going to be saying, okay, who's talking about me? Don't get me wrong, you got to punch back when you're punched, you got to correct lies when he tells lies, but then we got to move on very quickly to how our ideas actually cash out in everyday life, because when we do that, we win. Look at the political trajectory of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. In 2010, when I was first getting into elected politics, it was a toxic issue for Democrats. By 2018, it was the winning issue for Democrats.
Sure.
And I think the reason is people saw what it meant in their everyday lives. And we got to be willing to talk not just at the highest level about our values, but at the ground level about how following our values cashes out. And instead, a lot of the time we've been stuck at that middle level, which is about the policy designs, before we really win the day, either for the values that motivate those policies or for the results that come from those policies.
In terms of how things have gone so far, obviously you got a lot of very good press early on in this run, and now you're getting a lot of good press about getting good press. Yeah. And you're polling very well. Your fundraising numbers are really big. The response, according to your campaign, in terms of what the fundraising response was yesterday to your formal announcement, is very impressive. Is this what you planned, or are you surprising yourself?
The trajectory of it is a lot faster than what we expected. So we're pleased. I mean, we certainly believed and hoped that the message would land, that we'd get traction, that people would be excited about the idea of a new generation of leadership and somebody coming from a different background like a mayor. You know, all of that is as we hoped, but the pace of it has been extraordinary. At the same time, you know, I'm trying not to fool myself, right? Obviously, it's no small thing to find yourself third in the polls related to the American presidency. On the other hand, when I go out on the street after this, the majority of people who pass by will not recognize me, and it's April. We've got a very long way to go in this process.
How do you scale up? How do you learn how to scale up to running a national level campaign? You have to do that not just for the general, but in order to win the primary. I know that you've worked on presidential campaigns before, Kerry, Obama. And so you've seen them in operation from a ground level perspective, but how do you learn how to run when you've never done anything remotely like this before?
We're very conscious of what we don't know, and so we're trying to take on advice from people who have seen some version of this movie before, from people who are involved in the Obama campaign to people who are involved in the Gary Hart campaign, just to learn as much as we can about how this works. And at the same time, recognize that each cycle is different, it has different dynamics, and we're also determined. I mean, somebody like me shouldn't do something like this unless we're prepared to do it in a novel way, in an original way. And we want to make sure that we're writing our own playbook. You know, organizationally, some things you just got to get the muscle memory of people who've seen it before. Ballot access in early states, organizing in different constituencies. And there are other things that I think the playbook really is changing. Digital is a good example. You know, we Democrats like to think of ourselves as the sophisticated ones, but in some ways we got outclassed on digital persuasion in 2016. I'm not just talking about the cheating and the nefarious stuff. I'm also just saying if you look at how much we spent on digital versus on traditional television, for example, in so many races, it was actually the Republicans who were seeing more of what could be done with digital involvement. And from a tactical perspective, you know, you don't have the sort of firms that you have around TV organized in quite the same way in the digital space. So we're going to have to build up some of this talent and capacity in-house. So it's a mix of building a great organization that you think can power you through in those early states and listening to people who have some insights. Because, you know, we, as you said, we've never been doing something like this in this way. And we need to learn from those who have seen these things before.